We sat there on that bench for what felt like forever, not speaking, not moving much, just being. His hand was still wrapped around mine, warm and steady, and I could feel how different it was from my husband's. Not better, not worse, just different. Like everything about Daniel was meant to remind me of a version of myself I hadn't visited in years. When I finally let go, it wasn't sudden, it was soft, like we both knew the moment had its time. And it was okay to end it, but something stayed. I could still feel his thumb brushing my knuckle after we started walking again. Do you remember that night we all got stuck in that cabin during the snowstorm? He asked, glancing at me with a half smile. I laughed almost without thinking. Of course I do. You tried to fix the broken heater and nearly set the curtains on fire. He chuckled, shaking his head. I wasn't trying to impress you. Well, maybe a little, I knew, I said, nudging him with my elbow. I thought it was sweet. He looked at me, eyebrows up. You did back then. Yeah, you were always trying so hard to pretend you didn't care when it was obvious. You did, it was kind of charming. He stopped walking and turned toward me. And what about now? I looked at him, really looked. His face was open and hard to read, but still holding something, waiting. I don't know, I said honestly. I'm not sure what we're doing right now. We're walking, he said simply, that's all. But it wasn't. Just that we both knew by the time we made it back to the car, the clouds had broken open, letting down soft streaks of sunlight across the street. The air smelled like rain on concrete and coffee grounds. Rich, familiar, oddly comforting. He looked at me before we parted ways. Can I see you again before I leave? I hesitated. Just for coffee, he added quickly, his voice gentle now, no expectations. I nodded okay. He smiled again, that same sideways grin, and then he walked off, hands in his pockets, fading into the city crowd. That night, I lay in bed next to Mark, my husband, as he scrolled on his phone, half watching some show. I couldn't follow. I looked at his face, familiar and worn and solid. This life we built, the quiet routine, the late dinners, the bills and birthday plans, and small disagreements about groceries. It was real. It mattered, but something inside me was awake, now alert in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. And it wasn't just about Daniel, it was about me, how easy it had been to forget that I once craved things, connection, unpredictability. The ache of being seen. The next afternoon I met Daniel again, same cafe, same table by the window. He brought flowers, small, awkwardly wrapped, clearly picked from somewhere. Local. You didn't have to, I said, trying not to smile too much. I know, that's why I did. We talked more this time, deeper things. He asked about the kids. I asked about his failed engagement, a detail I'd learned years ago but never dug into. He told me how he lost himself trying to be someone else, for someone else. The breakup felt less like an ending and more like a fix. I think I've been trying to find pieces of myself ever since, he admitted. And seeing you, you remind me of something. I forgot. I needed my breath caught. He wasn't trying to be fancy, just honest, and it was the kind of honesty that reached into the soft hidden places, the ones I kept locked under being a mom, a wife, and middle age. You're not the only one who feels that, I said quietly. He reached across the table and took my hand again. There was no waiting this time, just warmth and understanding. I'm not asking for anything more than this, he said. I just want to share something real with you, even if it's brief. I looked down at our hands, his thumb tracing gentle lines along my palm. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel reckless. I just felt present. It's strange how we spend so much of our lives doing the right thing, playing the part, holding it all together. And then one quiet afternoon, someone shows you a version of yourself you haven't touched in decades, and it changes everything. When we left the cafe, we didn't go straight home. He asked if I wanted to see something, the art exhibit at the small gallery nearby. I agreed without thinking too much. The gallery was quiet, sun filtering in through tall windows, casting long shadows across abstract canvases. We walked slowly side by side, like we had all the time in the world. He stopped in front of a painting. A stormy ocean with a single red boat struggling against the waves. That's how it feels sometimes, he said softly, trying to keep your balance in a life that's not still. I didn't speak. I just stood beside him and looked at the painting, letting it sink in. Afterward, we said goodbye outside, neither of us quite knowing how to leave it. I'm leaving in 2 days, he said. But if you want, we could take a drive, just talk, no expectations. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I did. I'll think about it, I said as I watched him walk away. Something inside me stirred. Not longing, not even desire, but a quiet recognition of something precious, the permission to feel again, to be continued. The next day passed in a strange blur. I moved through my routine laundry, grocery shopping, replying to emails, but it all felt muted, like I was watching myself from outside. I caught my reflection in a shop window at one point, and paused. I looked like me, but also not quite. My eyes held something unfamiliar. Or maybe it was something I hadn't let myself see in years. That evening, Mark was late getting home from work. He called to say he'd grabbed dinner with a client and would be back after 9. I told him to take his time. My voice was calm, composed, but underneath, I felt a flutter of excitement I couldn't explain. Daniel's message came around 7. Still up for that drive? I didn't respond right away. I reread it a few times, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then, without fully thinking, I typed, "Yes, where should I meet you?" 10 minutes later, I was slipping into a soft sweater and a pair of jeans that made me feel like myself. Not a wife, not a mom, just me. I added a touch of lipstick. Not too much, just enough to remember the woman who used to enjoy getting ready for something unknown. Daniel picked me up outside the bookstore on Main Street. His car was clean, smelled faintly of cedar and mint gum. He looked surprised when he saw me, in a way that made my cheeks warm. "You look really good," he said, not hiding it. "Thanks," I murmured, settling into the passenger seat. "So where are we going?" He smiled. "I figured we'd just drive and see where we end up." We drove along the coast, winding past quiet neighborhoods and open stretches of sea. The sky was painted with hues of orange and lavender, the sun dipping low behind the horizon. Windows down, the breeze tangled in my hair, warm and salty. For a while, we didn't talk. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was comfortable. I let my hand rest on the edge of the window and closed my eyes for a moment, just feeling the wind on my skin free. Eventually, he broke the silence. "I always thought you were extraordinary," he said, his voice low, like he didn't want to disturb the wind. I looked at him, surprised. "You barely knew me back." "Then I knew enough," he said. "I saw how you lit up a room. Not just with your smile, with your attention. You really listen to people. That's rare." Swallowed hard. Compliments like that felt new now in marriage. You don't always hear them after the early years. You trade poetry for grocery lists, passion for practicalities. And then someone like Daniel shows up, speaking into places you didn't realize were hungry for words. We pulled into a quiet overlook high above the ocean, where the waves crashed against rocks far below. There was no one else around, just the sound of the surf and the fading light stretching across the sky. Daniel turned off the engine, but neither of us moved to get out. "I almost told you once," he said after a moment. "Back in college, I was going to tell you how I felt, but then Mark proposed and I stepped back." I turned to him, heart heavy with something I couldn't quite name. I had no idea, didn't want to make things complicated. "You looked so happy with him. And maybe I thought maybe you weren't meant for someone like me." My eyes met his, and I felt the weight of all those unspoken years pressed gently between. "You ass, I was happy," I said softly. "But that doesn't mean there wasn't space for something else or someone else." He reached over hesitantly and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered just briefly along my cheek. "You're still beautiful," he said, "but it's more than that now. You're whole, stronger." I laughed a little. "I don't always feel strong. You don't have to. Strength isn't about never feeling lost. It's about what you do with that feeling." There was a long pause, the air between us crackled with something that felt like both possibility and risk. I turned away, looking back out at the ocean. "Daniel, I don't know where this is going or what it means," he nodded. "You don't have to know. I don't either, but we're here, and I think that matters." Silence again, this time heavier, more charged. When I looked at him again, I saw the question in his eyes, the one he didn't dare ask aloud. And maybe it was the warmth of the night air, or the sound of the waves below, or just the quiet. Ache I'd carried too long, but I leaned in just a little. He met me halfway, the kiss was soft, barely there at first. Then deeper, not rushed or desperate. Just present, like we were remembering something we never actually had. His hand came to rest on my cheek, steady and reassuring, and mine found his chest, feeling the thud of his heartbeat under my palm when we finally pulled apart. I kept my eyes closed for a moment, afraid of what I might see in his. But when I opened them, all I saw was warmth and honesty. I didn't expect that. I whispered, "Me neither," he said. "But I don't regret it, neither did I." As he drove me back into town, we didn't say much more. The silence was full but not heavy when he dropped me off. He didn't ask to come in. He just walked me to the door, brushed a kiss against my cheek, and whispered, "Thank you for tonight." I nodded, fingers trembling, as I slid my key into the lock. Inside the house was dark. Still, my husband's shoes weren't by the door yet. I stood in the hallway, quiet and alone, hearing only the faint hum of the fridge and the echo of my own breath. I touched my lips, still tingling from the kiss, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone else's life to begin again, to be continued. The next morning came with a strange softness. The sun filtered gently through the curtains, casting warm stripes across the bed. Mark had already left for work. He had left a note on the counter, something about a client meeting and not to wait up for dinner. I stood in the kitchen, my fingers wrapped around a mug. I hadn't yet sipped from staring blankly out the window. The kiss still lived on my skin, not in a way that made me feel guilty, though maybe I should have, but in a way that made me feel awake. It wasn't just about Daniel. It wasn't even about attraction or forbidden feelings crossing some invisible line. It was the fact that someone had looked at me, really looked, and seen something alive, something worth touching, something worth reaching for. I hadn't felt that in years. When Daniel texted later that day, my stomach fluttered. It was a simple message: "Leaving town tomorrow. Could I see you one last time, just to say goodbye?" I sat with it for a while. My thumb hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it or pretend that this entire detour never happened. Another part, the louder, more honest part, needed to see it through. Yes, one last time. We met in the same park under the tall oak trees near the sculpture garden. The air was thick with summer heat, and the sound of cicadas buzzed in the distance. He was already there when I arrived, sitting on the bench like he belonged there, like he'd been carved into the moment. When he saw me, he stood, his eyes soft and unreadable. "Thanks for coming." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "I know," he said, "but I'm glad you did." We walked in silence for a bit, no hand holding this time. No flirtation, just two people aware of the small shifting gravity between them. "I've been thinking," I said finally, "about what all this means, about what it doesn't mean too." He nodded, "Same. I don't regret it." I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. "But I also can't run away with a memory. I have a life. And it may not be thrilling, but it's mine." He smiled, not with sadness, but with a kind of peaceful acceptance. "I wasn't going to ask you to," he said. "This, whatever it wasn't about stealing something. It was about remembering something, feeling it." I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw it, not the old college friend, not the man who kissed me under the stars, but a reflection of all the questions I hadn't let myself ask. "You reminded me who I was," I said, "who I still am. That's a gift I didn't know I needed." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper. He pressed it into my hand. "I wrote this on the plane here," he said, "before I even saw you. I don't know why, I think I just needed to put it somewhere." I didn't open it, not yet, just tucked it into my purse and nodded. We walked back toward the lot. The air between us felt different, now lighter, unburdened. He stopped by his car and turned toward me. "I'm not disappearing," he said, "but I'll give you space. You have your path." And I respect that. I felt my throat tighten. I reached up and touched his cheek just once. It felt like closing a book softly, not slamming it shut. "Goodbye, Daniel, goodbye." He got in the car, and I stood there until the taillights disappeared into the bright afternoon back home. The house was quiet. I slipped off my shoes, set my bag down, and pulled out the folded piece of paper. I opened it slowly. Careful with the creases, it wasn't a letter, just a few lines written in his familiar handwriting. You were always the quiet in the chaos, the calm in the storm. If I only ever get one moment of real in my life. I'm glad it was you. I sat down on the edge of the couch, the words settling over me like a blanket, not heavy, just present. I let myself cry, not out of sorrow or longing, but out of something deeper, gratitude, clarity. That night, Mark came home early. He smelled like aftershave and the heat of the pavement. We ate dinner at the kitchen counter. I told him about a book I wanted to start writing. He looked up surprised. You haven't written in years. He said, I know, I want to start again. He smiled at me. That's good, you should. And as I sat beside him, the man I had chosen, the man who sometimes forgot to look, but never stopped staying, I realized something. Loving someone isn't about always feeling fireworks. Sometimes it's about the courage to rediscover yourself, even if it takes someone else to hand you the match. Daniel didn't break anything in my life. He lit a candle in the dark, and with that light I found a part of me I'd quietly abandoned. I didn't leave my marriage, I didn't rewrite my life, but I did begin again with fuller eyes, a softer heart, and a whisper of something beautiful I'll always carry. And that was more than just about him. It was about me rediscovering the spark inside and carrying it forward in my own quiet way.